So when I was a young lad, I had a subscription to this popular magazine publication called Popular Science. For a child in the early 2000s, this was like a glimpse into the future. I mean, it's a magazine, it comes through the mail, it's gotta be legit. This stuff exists, it's coming. I will have a flying car. While today we would describe this as clickbait, these headlines were over-ambitious, to say the least. Now, as a kid, the time frame that always stuck with me was predictions for 2020. This was a year that it just seemed like everything changed. Computational power would exceed all human brains ever in existence. Genetic engineering would allow us to have superhuman strength and abilities. Immortality was within our grasp, and nanobots would reshape matter. Could we just regrow limbs? Robot buddies? Robot fish? Sure, why not? Anything and everything could happen, and it could happen soon. And of course, as a kid, this gave me pretty big expectations for that year. Expectations that were, somewhat let down. And going through this, it made me wonder whether this was the product of popular science and trying to sell magazines, or if people actually thought the future would be like this. The future being last year. And so I scoured the internet looking for 2000s predictions of 2020, finding sources from researchers in specialized fields to just random tech bloggers. I don't normally think to look at future predictions from so recently because I expected them to be more or less right. So I compiled all the information and planned on making one old big video, but it turns out that video would be too long. It'd be like a couple hours long. So instead I decided to just focus on computers. You know, I figured computers is a good place to start off. Computers were big in the 90s. Computers were big in the 2000s. I bet they expected some cool shit to happen. And they did, but it wasn't what you would expect. Predictions of just sheer speed were far overblown, computers being 10,000 times faster than machines of the day. That actual number is closer to about 1,000, but you know. But most of the predictions felt like silicon itself was old hat, man. See, they knew, just as we know today, that there was a limit to the silicon chip. As it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, eventually it's so small that, you know, it just doesn't work anymore. None of that matters too much for this video. But they knew it, and the solution was beyond silicon. Okay, so computers powered by light. How does that work? Well, it's a lot like current silicon chips. You could have energy pulses that are ones or zeros, but the difference is it's light. It could shoot out faster. You could have multiple light beams at once, so you could do more calculations at once. It just seems cool. And yeah, it probably would have been. We use light in computing a lot nowadays, but it's for data transfer and fiber optics. This is different than doing the actual computations. Wavelengths of light disperse, so it would be fairly easy for these beams of information to turn into a prism, which would give you potentially incorrect data. Light also has to fit within that spectral bandwidth that it is created. The reason we haven't seen much investment in this technology is that at best, it seems like these light-powered computers would just be a little bit beyond current CPUs. This would be potentially worth it if the limit of current computer chips was just stuck right here, but we can still go a little bit more. By the time we would hit the absolute minimum potential of silicon, for light to reach the same wavelengths of that size between transistors, we would have to be sending like X-rays or gamma rays even, which is probably not so ideal. Given all this, light technology sort of faded away, but luckily for the 2000s people, this was just the first step of a grand plan to a computational future. quantum computing is interesting because, well, it's still brought up as the potential successor to silicon. A lot of this seems to be, well, just pop science getting involved. Quantum physics and by association, quantum computation is almost a catch-all term nowadays for anything can happen. It's wacky and random, so whatever. But most of quantum physics isn't about randomness or unpredictability. It's really just a few elements, but these are the elements that best help quantum computers work. The idea relies on superposition. What is superposition? Well, in a quantum state, imagine something can be up or down. And also, it can either be blue or red. So if you were to sit down and just pick up every single one and look at it, you'd find a bunch of up blues and down reds and down blues and up reds. But the problem is, when you measure it, you can really only know one variable of that state. Yes, if you look at an up particle and expect it to be red, simply looking at it can make it blue. This doesn't mean the particle is eagerly waiting for your eyes and it knows you're looking at it and just wants to, fuck with you. But rather, it's in a state between up, down, or red, blue, and just everywhere in between at the same time. When we look at it through our three-dimensional brain tubes, a single state is determined. Now this is weird, it's wacky, and why it happens is possibly beyond our human intellects. But the effects of it are still usable because, well, think about how normal computers work. Binary code, ones and zeros. A single state of yes or no. Imagine adding something in between, another state, or a combination of states. Sounds pretty cool. Just more numbers, right? That's cool. Yeah, you kind of. See, instead of a bit, which would be your 1 or a 0, you have the qubit. And a qubit can inherently store more information simultaneously because of these superpositions. What this means is a quantum computer can potentially do massive calculations in just a few steps, which would mean less time. This relationship is measured as 2 to the power of n, with n being the number of qubits. So 2 to the power of, say, 10 qubits is 1024 calculations, while 2 to the power of 20 qubits would be 1,048,576 calculations. 2 to the power of 30 qubits it's over 1 billion calculations. Wow. Once you start getting to thousands of qubits or millions of qubits, now, having access to these kind of calculations simultaneously, the potential would be, it's almost impossible to describe without having it. So, where are these quantum computers? And when are they getting to my smartphone? Right now, the best quantum computers in the world can only manage a few dozen qubits at most. And many of those qubits that are in them are rendered useless due to reasons I'll get to. First off, creating a qubit isn't like just putting down a little transistor. You have to manipulate the quantum state of these particles incredibly accurately. Quantum states that can change for just any reason. Somebody turned on a little microwave, there's your quantum states changed. Space rays shoot out, your states changed. How this is done in research and development is by cooling the particles to near absolute zero, and then putting those particles inside a bunch of silicon, and then using very accurate microwaves and frequencies to control position. But to accurately determine and manipulate this on the scale of thousands or millions of, qubits, that might not even be possible. Even in the best case scenario, just that environmental electromagnetic noise coming from the universe would distort the information to a point where it's possibly unusable. In short, these machines are built for lab work only. in controlled areas. Even in the best case scenario, they wouldn't be usable for consumers, and you probably wouldn't want them to be either. See, these kind of computers, they don't work like your old PC. They're not built to render things faster or transfer data faster. They wouldn't even be all that good at doing it. They are best for doing large computations that have no purpose beyond, well, the lab. Say you want to measure a vector in 50-dimensional space or run quantum simulations. This is what these machines excel at, or would excel at if developed on this scale. Something I've seen pop up recently is how quantum computing will be adopted to ruin encryption of normal computers. I mean, since these machines can potentially do all these calculations so fast, wouldn't all encryption techniques be useless? Well, kind of. There are some protections that do exist and would be implemented against quantum computers trying to crack encryption, but nobody uses them, and nobody really needs to. Because to get to the level that a quantum computer could run these numbers to break the encryptions that these researchers discuss, it would take millions of qubits. Currently, the best machines in the world have around 70 or 50 at most, and many of those are rendered unusable due to noise. This, again, might not ever happen, let alone in the next few years. But lucky for the predictors of the 2000s, this was not the end. Yeah, so an idea that seemed everywhere in the 2000s was that the future was not going to be about computers. No, it was about genetics. Biohacking. This seems weird because we don't really talk about it that much, not compared to computers, right? Well, see, in 2000, a lot of people were excited because there was a sheep, and a lot of people liked the sheep. It was called Dolly the sheep. Dolly was the first cloned animal, and it inspired everybody that, well, they cloned a sheep. Are we playing God? If this wasn't enough, most of the predictions were based on the hype around the Human Genome Project. Now, this was pretty overhyped. I mean, it's cool, the idea to map out the entire human genome. The media and science fiction fans were quick to see this as the next big leap. Once we've mapped out the human genome, well, we can grow limbs back. All diseases will be cured within just a few years. We could craft life in our living rooms. And all of this was coming by 2020. See, my problem here is that I think a lot of people thought we were going to have data, like the actual Star Trek character data, in our homes by 2020. I mean, biocomputer, Android, the future, it's all there. It's gonna happen. In reality, biocomputing it's not that wacky. You basically just have organic compounds that function as a standard logic gate. Instead of silicon, it's organic tissue. The benefit of this would be that it could use potentially less energy and maybe, just maybe, self-replicate. But none of this has been shown in any real capacity. And it probably wouldn't be that practical anyway, because the size of a cell is millions of times larger than our current transistors, which means you can fit a lot less computational power in a lot bigger package. These were the real predictions of people just 20 years ago, inspired by the things around them and extrapolating that information and just going a little crazy. I can't blame the past for trying, for being a little excited. Well, I guess I can a little bit. Oh, also I have another channel. Go watch the videos, because now I gotta make 2 videos on 2 channels, and it's hard. Just go watch it. I don't ask for much. I guess you did watch this one, so thank you for that. But if you really want to watch more Tyler, I know I would. Go watch more Tyler. Tyler needs money for rent and taxes and food and cat toys. A lot of cat stuff.